Good morning, everybody. This is Knoxville Nate Digital, and James Bonneville on Man Coverage. We are talking college football. College football is back. We are streaming live right now on YouTube channel, on our Facebook channel. We will be rebroadcast today on our brand new Roku channel. Apparently, we are not streaming live to Twitter because you have to have premium. So we're going to set that up and get that working, whatever that cost is. Elon's got to get his money, right? He's struggling for cash. So we're going to have to send Elon Musk some more money so he can post shit. But James, long off season, it kind of felt like.
Oh my God.
How you doing, buddy?
Eternal. But we got 20 days left till kick. I cannot wait.
Me neither, buddy.
I mean, heck, probably less than that with week 0 popping up. I mean, we're getting around the bend here really quick. So let's get at her.
Yeah, no, it seems like it's been a long time since there was a college football game, and obviously, I chose not to watch the final one based on the team that was playing. And why don't we just get right into that? They won the game, and were allowed to play in the championship and all this, but this has been a consistent problem with college football for as long as I can remember, where teams cheat, teams break the rules, teams pay players, teams play guys that are ineligible, and then the punishment comes after the crime. And really what happens is the players who had nothing to do with it, or the coach who wasn't even there, they're the ones that gets punished. What do you think about what's going on right now with the whole cheating fiasco and everything that we've learned? This, at least what's happened this summer.
Well, it just keeps getting worse and worse. I mean, the way Michigan's going to look at it is flags fly forever, so they're not going to care because they finally got over the hump. And that show cause to Jim Harbaugh really means nothing because he'll be coaching on Sundays in LA for the Chargers. I think it was really insulting that the very first game they make Jim Harbaugh the freaking honorary captain of the game against Fresno State. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's a joke. And James, I wanted to get your, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to ask you a question. Why does their athletic director still have a job? I mean, there's a lack of institutional control up there. And I'm not just saying this because I hate them, because I do, and I don't hide that. But I'm not talking about my hatred for their program or their team, or because I'm an Ohio State fan, which I am. But I'm asking about the rules that have been broken, the cheating that's been, proven, all the things that have gone on in the last couple of years in Ann Arbor. And this athletic director who's in charge, he just keeps rolling along. Why is this guy not under more fire?
Because they're Michigan. Let's be honest. If this was Indiana, all hell would be breaking loose.
If this was Ohio State, he would have already been fired.
Yeah, I mean, it is mind-blowing. I mean, I'm waiting for the Connor Stallion bobblehead day at Michigan because it's coming. You just know it is.
Yeah, they won. I mean, he won. It's more like they look at this guy as a hero because they won the national championship. But I mean, what are we teaching our kids? It's okay to cheat. Hell, if you cheat, you win. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. I mean, that I feel like that. Well, I'm joking, but I'm not.
First of all, you have to, that is the SEC trademark motto. So you have to make sure you get the trademark in there. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. So, just don't want to make any SEC lawyers upset on that. But yeah, no, you're right. 100%. I mean, you look back at the stats of Jim Harbaugh, his win-loss percentage prior to Connor Stallion and then after. When Connor Stallion got there, they were 40-3. 40-3.
Yeah, and the record before that was not good. In fact, if you go back to 2020, when they just were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and finished the year 2-4, and there was a lot of Michigan fans that were calling for Jim Harbaugh to be fired, and he knew it. Everybody knew it, and he was basically scrambling to try and save his job.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, they started winning all these games that they were not winning prior to this. And I think that's when you get it back, you get your back against the wall, you usually come out swinging. And I feel like, that's kind of what led to this was, he wanted to save his job. He knew that he had to beat Ohio State. He knew that he had to, get into the playoffs, all that type of stuff, win in the Big Ten, and it was win at all cost. What did you it's not a coincidence about this record. I mean, it's just, I'm not just saying this. I mean, it's a big swing. And I think it's pretty obvious that the cheating was going on. And, where do we go now? I mean, what do you think's coming next? Because who the hell knows?
I honestly, you don't. I mean, the biggest problem is, and I feel bad for the NCAA because this is the only national championship they don't have control over. So even if they drop the hammer on them, guess what? Michigan still keeps the title.
Do they?
Every other sport, the NCAA controls the title. They control the championship. In football, they don't. What is right about that? Then what's the point of having the NCAA?
I think this is just another example that we don't need them, because what are they doing? They're not, they're not enforcing rules to any degree. They're not, they're not really in control of anything, are they, James?
Well, when you don't control the championship, what really are you in control of? I mean, you're in control of every other championship except this one. Why don't the university presidents give them the control? They don't. Because you and I both know if they did, Michigan would not be the national champion right now.
They wouldn't have gotten to play in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the whole thing. If you knew this team cheated, you suspended obviously they had proof back when the season was going on, or they wouldn't have suspended Jim Harbaugh for the last 3 games. And let's be honest, he was suspended the first part of the season as well. Yeah. So you've got this guy that's been suspended twice in one season, and it's just like, who cares? We're not gonna stop them from what they're doing. They're winning, so who cares? And it's this constant, punishing after the fact that really bothers me. The people that are involved in the scandals are not getting punished at the time. However, in this instance, I think they have an opportunity at least, to show some backbone, because Sharon Moore's still there. And yeah, he's been exposed as not only being, implicit in the cheating, but then the cover up, deleting text messages, deleting stuff off his computer after they'd already, after the NCAA had already asked for it. So I think the only thing they can do that'll at least save some face is, hammering him, right?
I would think, but will they? I don't know.
I don't believe it.
I mean, quite frankly, I think you could go as far as he should get a show cause.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he should be fired. I think he should have at least a 3-year show cause and should be suspended for a year. He's just implicit, he's just as involved in this as Jim Harbaugh is, if not more.
I mean, I think as the story keeps coming out, and there's that Netflix special coming, call me crazy, but don't you think in Connor Stallion's mixed up head that he thought that one day he was going to be the head coach at Michigan?
I think he thought that they were going to have his back, and that by what he was doing, he was going to go up the ranks. I believe that. I don't know if he thought he'd be the head coach.
I mean, not the next head coach, but a future head coach.
Yeah.
And he's so loyal that he would do anything to do it.
Yeah, I do believe that. I think he felt like if he did what he was asked and he helped them win, which he did, then he was going to get rewarded for it. And I don't think he's been really rewarded for it.
That we know of.
that we know of. I think he definitely got some cash. I mean, he started his own company now. So, this is a guy who was a intern slash, graduate assistant slash, low tier assistant coach who's now, got the cash to start up a business. I mean, where'd that come from?
Because
I
he
think,
got a ring.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 He's got one. He may have the damn trophy at his house. For all I know, that wouldn't shock me. So it's just a bad look for the entirety of college football, in my opinion. It's a bad look for everybody involved, and I just think the only way that the NCAA can save any face is if they, hammer them, and not just the school, but everybody that was involved that's left. And this coach going to the NFL thing has been a problem before. This USC situation where they obviously uncovered that USC was cheating and Pete Carroll was bending rules, and they hammered USC pretty good. Honestly, I mean, that affected their program for years, and Pete Carroll just went to go win Super Bowls. So
well, heck, you look back at Meyer when he left SMU to go to the Colts. Same way. I mean, SMU will still go down as probably the greatest scandal of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was, and they were hammered. I mean, that they got the death penalty. So
yeah, but no one's ever going to get that again after what SMU went after the fact. I mean, hell, they're finally after 40 years.
Yeah,
they're back. I wouldn't say they're even back. They're in a respectable conference, like in a power conference again.
Right, but they're still not back.
No,
I wouldn't say, because they've just never gotten back to that. Where they were. I would say they've never been the same. And shout out, by the way, to Brian O'Meara, my best friend Chris O'Meara's uncle, who was the left tackle for the Pony Express. Hope you're doing well, Brian, and hope you're watching. And we get to meet up again soon. And let's move on, because it makes me sick to my stomach and throw up in my mouth every time I talk about the cheaters. And letting them go on and play in the playoff was just absolutely ridiculous. And we knew it while it was going on that this stunk, and it stinks worse now. To be honest with you, I was really praying that Washington could beat them, just so that at least
they weren't a good matchup. Honestly, the better matchup would have been Texas with those D tackles. But
and that passing game. I mean, I feel like Texas could have picked them apart a little bit. The secondary for Michigan was good. I'm not saying they weren't, but I'm just saying I think with the ability to run and throw, the way that Texas did, I feel like they would have matched up a little bit better with them. But whatever. We're talking about 2024 now, so let's move on. Let's go ahead and start talking about the conferences and doing a breakdown of each Power Four conference on who we think is going to be the top 5 teams. Let's talk about of those top 5 teams, what is our biggest concern, and what is their biggest question mark, I say, going into the season. I mean, we know what these teams look like on paper, but obviously no one's played a game yet. So let's talk about that. James, why don't you kick it off with your top 5? I'll give you my top 5, and then we can go through and kind of go through those teams as far as what we think the biggest question mark is with each one of them. And then we can talk about as well which team might surprise us the most out of that conference.
Well, let's kick it off with the SEC. I think you'd be hard pressed not to go with Georgia 1. I mean, you look at how much they got back, plus Carson Beck. I mean, he really had an effective year last year, really controlled the ball in many ways. And with his leadership back, I got to say right now, I predict him to be the Heisman frontrunner going into this year. I think their receiving core and losing Brock Bowers is going to be a major negative to them. Getting ETN coming in at running back, but then losing Ra Thomas at receiver. I'm worried about their passing game, but you look at what Beck's done. He's very effective in controlling and not turning the ball over, and they bring 7 guys back on defense. Then this is where things get interesting. I'm going Texas too, just based on what they have. I think their biggest negative is they lost a huge hole. They have a huge hole to fill at their D tackle spot. I mean, losing those 2 guys, I don't think people understand how good those 2 D tackles were. And in the SEC, where running is so big, who replaces them could be beneficial to them. I mean, you look at their schedule, they play all the right games at home. It is, they really got a schedule that really benefits them. Missouri, I think, could go 3. The Alpha Nerd has done a great job in Columbia. And I think you look at the way the SEC is set up right now, especially on their offense, I think they could take that next step. They lost a lot on their defense, but I honestly look at what they've done, especially in recruiting. I mean, you could see them take that next jump, putting Bama at 4, because that is such a transition going from Nick Saban. I mean, I'm a huge Kalen DeBoer fan, but man, it's Bama. And we've seen what happened when big coaches have come in after Paul Bear Bryant left. When they lose a game, people are going to freak out. How do they respond to that? And does Jalen Milroe fit that DeBoer system? And my number 5, Tennessee. I think what we saw from Nico in the bowl game, I think you could really put them up there. I think Ole Miss can make an argument. LSU can make an argument. But right now, I got to put Tennessee there because Nico really showed me a lot and how he could be that really next generation quarterback in Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, he's played 1 game. So I don't – the thing that's worrying me a little bit is the Heisman talk.
I think that's a little premature. You're 100%.
I'm not sure where we're getting at. The guy's played 1 football game. So
yeah.
I'm like you. I like him. I think he looked good. He looked like he didn't look like a freshman out there. He looked like he'd played before. So that's good. I mean, I like that. And, I'm pretty impressed with what I've seen so far, but I'm not ready to hand him the trophy in New York just yet. So I think we need to slow our roll a little bit on that. I'm with you with Georgia being number 1. I mean, I think you have to look at the bowl game and what they did to a Florida State team by beating them by 60 points. Whatever. Some of the guys from Florida State didn't play. I don't give a shit. You beat a team that's undefeated by 60 points. You're doing something right. Georgia's number 1 for me. As much as it pains me, Texas is number 2. I've got Bama 3. Just because it's going to be
Bama.
tough. I mean, it's Bama though. And they did lose, a couple guys, Downs is probably the biggest loss in my opinion to them. But, I think they'll survive that. And then they had a really good recruiting cycle. They got some guys in the portal. They're recruiting well moving forward. I mean, recruiting's not been affected in my opinion so far. So I like where Bama's at. I like Jalen Milroe. You know that I'm a fan of his. Everybody doubted him, and he took him to the college football national championship playoff. So obviously he doesn't suck. And the people that said that were dead ass wrong. And I hope you're happy. But I got Bama 3. I've got Ole Miss 4. Ole Miss has been ranked highly before, and then they've kind of, underperformed or not lived up to the billing in some instances. But I got to give Lane Kiffin some credit here. This is the best roster he's ever had while he's been at Ole Miss. I think they are the most complete team. He's done a phenomenal job in the portal. I really liked the pickup of the defensive tackle that they got from Texas A&M, the former, number 1 overall pick out of high school. I feel like that kid's going to make a big difference in the middle. And, I like the play calling that comes out of Ole Miss, whether it's Lane calling the plays or Charlie Fupa, Weiss's son. I don't really know exactly who's calling every single play there, but I think the offense has got a chance to thrive. And I've got Ole Miss at 4. Number 5, I've got Missouri and Tennessee sharing number 5 because I think both those teams are, fairly equal right now. And I do feel like Missouri's outperformed expectations. I mean, Eli has done. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for what he did last year, winning all those games in the SEC, beating Ohio State in the bowl game. I know we had our third string quarterback, but that's not important. What's important is they won, and they looked good, doing it in the fourth quarter. But I like this Missouri team, and until I see them not play good, I've got to give them some credit. So I've got Tennessee and Missouri tied at 5, but really the only difference I had was putting Ole Miss at 4 and then putting Bama at 3. So we're pretty close there with our projections. With that group of teams, why don't we talk about what the biggest concern is for you with each one of them? Obviously, we're talking about what we've got on paper thus far. So what do you see with each of these teams that bothers you? Why don't we start with Georgia? Is there any concern with Georgia this year? I mean, besides, I guess wide receiver. I mean, is that it?
A wide receiver, depth at running back. I mean, is Yurcik going to be a good replacement for Bowers at tight end? And then you look at their road schedule. I mean, they got to play in Atlanta against Clemson, at Kentucky, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. That's not an easy schedule for road. And I mean, Carson Beck has got to perform like he did last year on his touchdown to interception ratio. If he does that, and their defense plays the part, they should win the SEC. But this is not a good schedule for Georgia by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all. And I don't think enough people are talking about this opening matchup. I think Clemson is, wanting to get back to where they were, and I feel like, they've got a kid who's started. He's taken his lumps, and we're going to talk about them here in a minute. But that's going to be a tough opener. Don't you agree?
Agreed. Very
also,
much so.
What if Carson Beck goes down? I mean, obviously, every team's going to be devastated if they lose their starting quarterback. Florida State, probably the best example of that. But what do you think about them behind Carson Beck? I mean, my biggest question mark with them is definitely wide receiver. Who's the big playmaker? Who's the guy that can just win a one-on-one whenever he needs to? That bothers me. Also, if Carson Beck goes down, I'm not they don't have anybody else that's ever played.
Well, you got Jaden Rashada, who that kid has got high upside. I think people may forget him because he was supposed to go to Florida until they couldn't make their payroll for his NIL deal, and then decided to go play at Arizona State for a year. And now he's at Georgia. I mean, this kid does have a high upside. When he went to Georgia, though, I sat there and wondered if it was a good fit for him. Honestly, when Oregon popped up, I thought Oregon would have been a very good fit for Jaden Rashada. But, playing at Georgia, we'll see. I mean, I would think, I know there are a lot of people putting Gunnar Stockton in that number 2 role. I would put Rashada.
Yeah. How much action did he see?
God, he saw some. I know that.
But he wasn't their starter for the whole year, was he?
He got hurt. I know he got hurt. I got to look it up when he was at Arizona State.
Okay. I just didn't think he was like their full-time starter for the whole year. But he did. He was very highly recruited. And Florida, that they were pretty happy to get him. And then, their check bounced. And he was out. So that's it. Let's move on to Texas. I think you already kind of hit on this. Obviously, replacing both of those huge, productive defensive tackles is going to be a big deal. Is there anything else besides that worries you at all with this team?
I mean, you lost Xavier Worthy to the pros, but you bring Isaiah Bond and Silas Bolden in at receiver. I mean, honestly, you look at their schedule. I mean, outside of one game, they play all the right games at home, and they got that game would be at Michigan week 2, and I think that's a big question mark for Michigan too as well, and how much they lost. I mean, Michigan lost a lot from last year. how do they respond? And we'll see. I mean, because we've seen Texas. How many times we said Texas is back, and they pull an 8-4. I mean, it was like the Lloyd Carr record over and over again. They'll find a way to go 8-4. And
yeah, they do. But last year was pretty good. We've seen a lot of coaches go down there and try and succeed. You know, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, Steve Sarkisian. I mean, it's been a revolving door down there of guys who can't bring this program back to where it wants to be. But this program, in my opinion, is back because they showed last year they can compete for a national championship. And now, not only do they have Quinn Ewers, who, you know, let's be honest, lit it up last year, but they've got Arch Manning right behind him. And I watched some practice on Arch, and I watched the spring game. Let me tell you, this guy could start for pretty much every other team in college football. So I think that's a good situation to have, is two of the best quarterbacks in college football on the same roster. Don't you agree?
Agreed. One thing I will say, though, is something that just got reported this week. You know, they lost Jonathan Brooks to the pros, who I think is going to be a hidden gem in fantasy this year.
Carolina.
For Carolina. But CJ Baxter, the backup, who got quite a bit of role last year, went down with a knee injury this week, and it is sounding like he is not going to play this year. So if he doesn't play, Jaden Blue is going to have to be the next guy up. And what do we know about him? Not much. I mean, he ran for 407 yards last year, but it was probably all in cleanup.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt that's a concern. So still pretty solid. I think Texas will be. And I think their first year in the SEC is going to going to shock some people. I think they're going to make some waves and play pretty well. What about Bama concerns you besides, you know, the greatest coach of all time being gone? I mean, that's a big concern.
That's a big concern. I mean, yeah, losing Caleb Downs on the backside, I think is mammoth. I look at their specialty players on offense. And the offense that Kalen DeBoer is going to bring in, I have hopes for Milroe, because he really, especially after that South Florida game, just was that little engine that could. He's going to have to carry more of the load this year. Now, that offensive line brings everybody back except one guy. I mean, they're going to be solid. So he's going to have the protection.
Yeah, I agree.
You got to go to Oklahoma, to LSU, to Tennessee, at Wisconsin. That is a hard road schedule. Hard.
Yeah, they've got a tough road to hoe, that's for sure. And replacing the greatest coach of all time while playing that schedule is going to be difficult for sure. So
no, they get Georgia and freaking Georgia, Missouri at home. I mean, and then you got Auburn, which it's a rivalry game. I mean, yeah, should they curb stomp them? Yeah, they should. But I've seen that game get weirder by the second.
I've seen Auburn beat, Bama when they had a fraction of the talent. So that's definitely a real rivalry. Let's talk. Let's talk Missouri first. Obviously, you know they're going to be missing Schrader, the running back, who. Yeah, he was a walk-on, but he was their best player last year on offense, besides maybe the wide receiver who continues to get better. What concerns you about them? I guess. I mean, we've been blowing them up and blowing Eli and the Tigers here ever since we started the show. But what about what could possibly go wrong with them this year? And what's your biggest question mark for Missouri?
I mean, I look at their defense and what they lost to the draft. I mean, they're going to have to replace that. I mean, you go back to the bowl game against Ohio State. They were so good on the blitz. I mean, everybody in the stadium knew it was coming, and Ohio State had no response to it. And they lost a lot of those guys to the draft. How do they respond?
Yeah, I mean, the Robinson who went to Arizona, that's going to be a big loss for him. Not only was he he was more, I think, of kind of a run player who could rush the passer.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a straight up edge guy. I mean, look at him;
No.
he's huge. But he was their main guy that got the most hits on the quarterback for their team. So I think losing Robinson's going to be huge. Losing Trader, obviously, the running back is going to affect them. But I do like their wide receivers. Their line play was pretty solid last year on both sides. So I think that they've got a lot of positives going into 2024.
With Cook to Burden is going to be fantasy gold. Honestly.
Yes. What's the ceiling for Cook? Because there was games where he looked solid, and there was times where he was a little bit shaky. The first half of the Buckeyes game, he did not play good. The Georgia game at the very end, he was shaky at best. What is this guy in your opinion as far as what can he be and where's he at?
I think he could be Carson Beck. Honestly, he has that same style and feel to him of a Carson Beck. I mean, he produces a good year this year. Honestly, I could see him being a first-round draft choice.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Wow. That's crazy. I never really thought about that. I mean, we've seen guys with less talent get picked higher.
Yeah.
So
you mean JJ McCarthy?
Shit, this whole class. I mean, 6 guys. Honestly, who went. I mean, Michael Penix, who we talk about him all the time. I love that guy.
Yeah.
But he had some injury concerns and some question marks coming in, and he went even though he's not even going to play. So. Yeah, you're definitely with the way that the overdrafting is going on in the NFL. I guess we could see him. Let's finish this up. Tennessee, Ole Miss together. Why don't you give me let's talk Tennessee first. What's the biggest question mark you have for them?
Well, I mean, in Nico. I mean, as much as I love the guy, he still only played so much. Can Brew McCoy hit that next level? I mean, you look last year; they were the polar opposite of the year before. I think you need to see a little bit more balance in this team on both sides of the ball, rather than being either really strong offense and questionable defense, or vice versa. But I mean, you look at Squirrel White and Brew McCoy. Brew McCoy's got to step up to be the guy everybody wishes he was, and I think they can make that next step.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was the biggest problem for them last year was their wide receiver group.
Yeah.
Jalen Hyatt was gone. Cedric Tillman was gone. Brew McCoy went down with injuries. Ramel Keaton was hurt. Squirrel White, showed some flashes, but wasn't that go-to guy. So this year you've got Chris Brazzell, who's going to be, really important for this team. And that's probably my biggest question mark is him. He's a sophomore transfer. And, that guy's he's going to be counted on to really perform. I think he came from Tulane, but they've got him penciled in to be a starter, James. And, I liked him, but the fact that he's running with the ones, I opened my eyes a little bit. So wide receiver to me is the biggest question mark. Joe Milton was not the reason this team lost 4 games last year.
Oh, God, no.
I mean, I know Tennessee fans love to blame Joe, but it just wasn't his fault, man. He was doing everything he could. Was he the greatest college football quarterback of all time? Definitely not. Was he Hendon Hooker? No, but he was a pretty good player and had little to no help.
I don't think people really appreciate how good Hendon Hooker really was. Like, I mean, we should be really putting him in a very high level in Tennessee folklore. Like, he should be in that same level of talking about maybe not Peyton Manning per se, but I would put him in the Heath Schuler category.
Yeah, I would too, especially considering the way that he brought this program back.
Yeah.
From the depths of hell. He should have a statue built for him, in my opinion. And I feel like he's somewhat forgotten a little bit. I mean, they just expected Joe Milton to be him, and he didn't have the same things around him, and he's not him. So I agree. I think Hendon Hooker was one of the best quarterbacks Tennessee's ever had. And
I mean, if you put Hendon Hooker in this past draft, do you not think Hendon Hooker is not a first-round draft choice?
I agree. I think he's a top 15.
Yeah.
I think he's top 15. I think he goes ahead of Bo Nix and maybe some of those other guys.
I would put him ahead of Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy. I mean, quite frankly, you know how high I was on Penix. I'm just as high on Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, I agree. If he can stay healthy,
yeah,
I think he's either going to become the starter in Detroit or he's going to find somewhere else to play. The only other, and this isn't a huge question mark because I think Dylan Sampson showed us enough last year as a running back at Tennessee to be good. But last year, Tennessee had kind of a four-headed monster.
Yeah,
they had Jabari Small, they had Dylan Sampson, they had Jalen Wright, who Jalen Wright was probably one of the best running backs in this NFL draft, if not the best, with the combine performance he put on. So Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, Joe Milton. There's a four-headed monster. Who are the other running backs that are going to help? I mean, Dylan Sampson's still there, but other than him, they've got Cameron Seldon. Yeah, Seldon, who played a little bit. But he certainly hasn't, established himself as a dominant runner. And then they have Deshaun Bishop, who we had on this show, a couple of years ago when he played running back at Carnes High School. But he certainly hasn't done anything in the NCAA. So that concerns me a little bit is the depth at running back.
Yeah. No, I agree.
What about Ole Miss? I just talked about how this is the best roster on paper that Ole Miss has had. They are, setting themselves up to compete in the West. Nick Saban's gone. So I just kind of think if Lane Kiffin is ever going to win the West, this is the year, right? What are your concerns? You didn't even have them in your top five. So what bothers you?
I had him 4. Oh no, I had him. I take that back. No, I didn't. You're right. I had him 6.
Okay.
Honestly, it's. I've always looked back at Ole Miss, and their defense under Lane has been the problem. Quite frankly, I thought he did a great job in the transfer portal. I mean, he brought up Walter Nolan alone. I mean, their defensive line is going to be much, much improved. Probably one of the best you've seen, probably going back to the days when, what's his name? Hugh Freeze was coach there when they had that strong a defensive line.
Yeah, Robert Nicodem-Diche.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this. They only lose 2 starters from last year's roster. Now it comes down to, can Jackson Howard produce? I mean, Jackson Dart produce. I mean, you got Walker Howard behind him, but I mean, if they had Quinton if Junkins was still there, we may be having a much different conversation, and I would be probably putting Ole Miss at 2 with an outside chance at 1.
Yeah. Junkins is a big loss for them.
Yeah.
I think people are underestimating how much he's going to help Ohio State and Will Howard in that backfield. And so I think that is definitely a concern. Jackson Dart's my biggest question mark. Everyone talks about how great he is, and he put up some good numbers and played well at times, but the big games, Kentucky game, he struggled. The Bama game, he struggled.
He's
Arkansas,
a roller coaster.
Yeah.
He's either really good or he sucks.
Yes.
And that's what scares me about him. I mean, Ole Miss is going to have receivers. I mean, it's like they grow on weeds down there. Like, they could come back with nothing from the year before. They're all going to be fast, and they're going to be good on the edges. And it's that way every freaking year. And now you're bringing guys back that produced last year. I mean, Trey Harris, had almost 1,000 yards with 54 receptions. I mean,
that's pretty solid. And, just the track record, as you said, of Lane developing wideouts, A.J. Brown, or the program developing wideouts, A.J. Brown and Metcalf and, go down the list, Mingo. They've had some pretty good guys come out of there. I'm blanking on the kid that Elijah Moore, who also came out of Ole Miss as well. So good work on the SEC. I think we've got it pretty much nailed down. The only team that we didn't really mention, who I want to ask you about, and I guess I don't know if this is my biggest surprise, but is a team I think that no one's really talking about that can compete for the SEC, and that's the Sooners. What do you think about Oklahoma and their chances this year?
That is, I mean, just the way they've played thus far under their coaching staff with Venables, I don't know what to think. I mean, honestly, Jackson Arnold's going to be everything. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's gone, Jackson Arnold's there. Can he be the guy everybody expects him to be? I mean, that's going to be the key. And I don't know what to think, honestly. I go back and forth in this one over and over and over again. I mean, Oklahoma could be up on that top end, and they could be down by Florida.
Yeah, I agree. I could see them surprising people and competing. I could also see them, if they lose a couple up front, panicking and struggling. So who's your biggest surprise in the SEC? What team do you think maybe isn't getting the pub?
I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud. A&M.
Wow.
I think A&M could be the surprise team of this conference that could possibly hit that top 5.
We'll find out real quick.
Yeah.
They play Notre Dame in about, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks? So we're going to know, whether the curse of Jimbo's been lifted, right?
I mean, losing Evan Stewart is going to hurt
a
lot.
Yeah, he was their best wideout by far.
Oh, not only that, Walter Nolan. I mean, they just lost some guys to this changeover, and they just never look like a team.
No.
If Mike Elko can win at Duke and can transfer that to A&M, this could be a team that could be in that top 5. True,
but Jimbo Fisher won at Florida State, and he won at LSU, and he couldn't win there. So I'm gonna wait and see approach there.
Heck, Dennis Francione, win at A&M. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that could not. They've won other places, they couldn't win at A&M. It is a hard. You've got crazy ass boosters.
Yeah, crazy ass fans too. Those guys with the Milk Crew Club or whatever the hell it is, those guys scare me.
Yeah.
I don't want those people anywhere near my family. So let's talk a little Big Ten action here. Let's go ahead and go through the top 5, and then we'll run through the question marks a little bit quicker than we did the SEC, just because we're running out of time. But let's definitely get into the Big Ten today and break them down. Who do you got as your number 1?
Ohio State. I go Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan. That number 5 is really tough. I'll go with Wisconsin.
Wisconsin? Really?
Yeah.
You think they're going to take that big a jump, huh?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you look at what Fickle's done there. I mean, their quarterback play is what scares me right now. But right now, everybody else that could be ahead of them, I wouldn't put ahead of them. There's like definite tiers in the Big Ten. What about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good and sold at the top. That I like. My top 3 teams are Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and then the next tier, I guess, is where I'm struggling. I don't know really what to think of Michigan. I mean, they lost a lot of guys. I mean, they really, really did. I don't think they're going to just fall off the map because I believe that they still have, a good core. But I do think that there's going to be, a lapse in production. Think about they still, I believe, have Donovan Edwards, but Blake Corum is gone. JJ McCarthy's gone. Roman Wilson is gone. So that's a lot of touchdowns and points win ball games. So that concerns me. But a lot of people have picked Michigan over Penn State. So I guess I would have to put them 4 like you did. And then 5, I'm kind of teetering on USC. And then also, right there, I feel like, Nebraska has a chance to be better. I can't, I won't believe it until I see it.
Yeah.
But they've definitely improved their talent level. But I think I would have to go USC, probably right there, nipping at the heels. Let's talk about the top three teams, at least how me and you have them, with OSU, Oregon, Penn State. I would think with Ohio State probably the biggest question mark. I mean, I know this team better than I know any of the other teams, and I would still say probably the O-line is really the spot that concerns me the most. Quarterback is new, but I feel like even Will Howard is a step up from McCord. What's your biggest concern with the Buckeyes?
I honestly, if the offensive line doesn't create more depth, I think they have to take a serious look at that recruiting. And Fry may be moving on from Columbus, but I go back to quarterback. I'm not sure Will Howard's the answer. I mean, maybe they're going to be more running based this year. Um, God, you like those receivers so much. Honestly, between you, me, and the fence post, it wouldn't shock me one bit that Julian Sain or Aaron Nolan is the starting quarterback by the end of the year.
Yeah, I was saying that as well, and I was really thinking I don't think Devin Brown is him. I just don't like him, and I think it's time for him to go elsewhere. I don't mean to be mean, but I've watched him play, and he's not quarterback material at Ohio State. So I'm done with Devin Brown. He's out of the picture for me. That's where I'm at right now. Is Will Howard, Julian Sayin, and Aaron Nolan. And I don't feel like Aaron Nolan is getting the credit he deserves for what he's done so far. I think he's looked pretty good, and
that's what I've been hearing too.
Yeah, and he's just kind of an afterthought, and that really concerns me. So I'm hoping that he gets a solid look here and gets a chance to get out there, especially in these first couple of games. That's what my favorite part about the Ohio State team this year is our schedule. We've got a couple of games where we can figure things out and get rolling, hopefully, before we go on. Next squad, Oregon. Oregon has done a tremendous job. I've got to give Dan Lanning some credit. They have done a tremendous job in this offseason. I love the addition of the quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. I wanted him to go to Ohio State. So obviously I like him. Adding Evan Stewart, who we already talked about, I think is huge. James Jordan shown some things at running back. What is your biggest concern with this Oregon team? What could potentially derail them from making the playoff?
The schedule. I mean, it's as if you're playing a bunch of non-conference games all year long. Everything you've been used to is now new. You got to go to Wisconsin, to Michigan. I mean, they got to go to Purdue. Purdue is it's hard to play there because it's the exact opposite of everything you've played against, where it's a sleepy town. The crowd's quiet. The field's always weird. It's just a weird place to play. And you're playing against a bunch of teams you have very little experience against. And you have Ohio State coming to town to play against you. It is going to be hard for them to prep for this year because everything is so new.
But I think crisscrossing the country over and over again is going to affect things. I mean, just looking at, NFL is different, but still you have to put into play. These are human beings.
Yeah.
And going across the country, 4 time zones, flying home, going back, flying home, that eventually is going to get old.
You and I both know there's going to be an East Coast game they're going to play at a noon kick, which means it's 9 a.m. in Eugene. They're going to shit the bed at some point during one of those early morning games because they're not used to playing that early. No one is.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll see. Other than that, the team's pretty solid, right?
It's pretty good.
I don't see a ton of holes there, and it scares me because they got us a couple of years ago when they came in. to Columbus and beat Ohio State. So this is a team that's shown they can rise up for big games. I know they struggled last year against Washington, but that was the only time they struggled, buddy. I can't really say they struggled because they were in both of those ball games and played them tough. Let's talk about Penn State. Obviously, we know Penn State looks great when they're playing Purdue. They look great when they're playing Michigan State. And then they play Ohio State or Michigan, and their coach gets a little bit of a hiccup. So what do you see? I mean, to me, the biggest question mark is Drew Aller. I'm not as big on him as a lot of people are. I didn't really like what I saw from him last year, and I'm not 100% on him as a game-breaking quarterback. What do you think about Penn State, and where's your question mark with them?
Can't disagree on Drew Aller. I mean, he was a guy I was very excited on coming out of high school, but really, for a guy with all the metrics in the world, he really didn't show it last year. And what scares me even more is you lose 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen in your receiving core. Your best one is what? Julian Fleming, who's good, but they don't have the game breaker at receiver. So that means you're really going to have to rely on Singleton and who's the other running back that I like? Allen. I mean, they're going to have to really focus on that running game and rely on their defense, which is going to be great.
Yeah, I like the defense, and I the offense to me is the biggest question mark for them, the quarterback and the offense. And other than that, this is a great team. So let's talk about the last 2 squads real quick. Michigan, and we'll do Wisconsin for the sake of time. What do you think is the biggest question mark in Michigan? I mean, obviously, all the players that left. Where's the biggest hole at?
Offense, quarterback. I mean, you only bring 2 starters back. Can Alex Orji throw the ball with any effectiveness? I mean, we know they can run it, but I mean, you got to be able to throw it sometimes too as well. Otherwise, 3rd and long might as well be a punting situation. Their defense is going to be great again. I mean, Kenneth Grant is freaking amazing. Mason Graham, Will Johnson. I mean, they're all back. It's going to be a great freaking defense. But offensively, I mean, is this Iowa?
Might look a little bit like it. What about Iowa, by the way? I didn't mention them. You didn't mention them. This is a team that's played pretty good defense over the past few years. Does their offense get any better ever?
Here's a little story. Yesterday I had a scrimmage. Cade McNamara's statistics: 7 for 21, 20 yards passing, and an interception. Holy crap, that's an all-star day. It's Brian Ferentz is gone, yet he's never left the building.
Question answered. All right. Let's talk Wisconsin real quickly. What do you think? You obviously like them if you put them in your top 5. I like them. I love their coach. I think he's going to get them there. I don't know if this is the year. What do you think is their biggest question mark going into the season, at least on paper?
Tyler Van Dyke. I when I heard Tyler Van Dyke was transferring from Miami to freaking Wisconsin, I was like, did you watch him the last 2 years?
It was terrible.
Like, honest to God, I've never seen a guy lose more games. Now, the great thing in Madison is they say they're going to have this dairy raid. You and I both know when it comes right down to push comes to shove, they're going to run the freaking ball. And that offensive line is pretty good. And you bring a lot back on that defense. I mean, I traditionally wouldn't, but it was literally, you're going to laugh at me. It was Wisconsin or Rutgers. I was going to put it in the 5 spot. And I know you're sitting me like, Rutgers, look at their schedule. Look what they have coming back. This is a good team. This is a really good team. It all comes down to one name, Athan Kaliakmanis. If he shows like he did last year at Minnesota, then forget everything I said. But defensively, this team is legit.
Yeah, no,
their schedule is awesome.
No, I've seen them play live, and he's definitely improved the way that this team goes about their business. There's no doubt about it. He's a dick, but he is a pretty good football coach, and Greg Schiano. But I just, how many yards are they going to throw for every game? Who's their breakout wide receiver? I mean, their quarterback situation and, breakout wide receiver. And, that to me is what concerns me with them.
Their running game, though, is sick. Their running game is
I like the running
good.
backs. I love their offensive line. Played well last year at times and showed a good push. I just, if they get in situations where they have to throw the football, can they? And that was the problem last year. If they got, if they weren't on schedule, things got rather difficult.
My surprise the other way is USC not making a bowl.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to talk about. I had USC at number 5. You did not. What do you not like about them? What is your concern with USC?
Their defense, specifically their run defense. Man, you went from a conference. I mean, they already had problems with their defense last year. And now you're going to a conference that is so run heavy, they're going to get bowled over. And now you'll go up against a team like an Iowa or Wisconsin or Minnesota, where they're taking possessions off the board. It's going to become harder and harder for them to win, especially in November, late October, those games. And I just look at their schedule and I'm like, you got to go to Michigan, to Minnesota, to Maryland, to Washington, UCLA. You got Notre Dame, Nebraska. You got home against Rutgers, home against Penn State. This schedule is awful.
Yeah,
they play one now non-Power 5 team in Utah State. Like, people think them going 5-7 is unrealistic. I think 5-7 could be their ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, last year they had the Heisman Trophy winner. They had a Pac-12 schedule, and they went 7-5.
Yeah,
and all that is gone. So, maybe I just have this belief. I mean, you're paying this guy $12 million for a reason. I at some point Lincoln Riley's going to have to produce, right? I mean, they're not going to just keep giving this guy boatloads of cash to go 500, are they?
Great question.
No.
Until Nebraska and USC show it to me, I don't buy it. I don't.
No, I'm with you. I definitely have a lot of question marks on both of those teams right now, and especially USC. Nebraska, I think, will be better. The question mark there is obviously Raiola. I mean, he had some issues down the stretch in high school last year. You don't really want to go you don't really want to go backwards when you're being recruited. And he was the number 1 player overall, and then went the other direction. So I do think he's an upgrade over what they've had there. I mean, let's be honest. If Nebraska had a quarterback last year, they could have won 2 or 3 more games easy. And I think
they lost 5 one-score games.
Yeah,
5.
Don't you agree that if they had a quarterback, they could have won at least 3 more?
Yeah, but then you could say the same thing about Scott Frost. And how many one-score games did he lose? Like
a lot.
Oodles and oodles and oodles and oodles. Like, I have hopes from Matt Rule. I really do. But it just seems like it's in Nebraska's head right now that they just can't get over this hump. Their roster is significantly better, no doubt about it. But, I mean, how many times can you just choke games away?
Quite a few, apparently. They've become stellars of that. Talking about these two conferences, I would have to say we've got to think that the SEC and the Big Ten are the 2 best conferences now based on the additions they've made.
Yeah,
and across the board. What is the gap between these 2 conferences and the conferences we'll talk about next week? Do you feel like it's substantial?
It's like between here and the moon.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm at.
Honestly, the Big 12 is going to be interesting to watch, and we'll hit that next show because quite frankly, there's a lot of teams that could crack that top 5.
Yeah.
Like a lot more than you'll see the SEC or the Big Ten. The ACC the same way, but there's such a gap between the two that it's not even funny. I mean, you look at the travel schedule for both of them is going to be huge. I mean, the one thing the SEC's got going for it is the travel. Yeah, it's a lot of travel, but it's not like the other 3 conferences. I mean, West Virginia to Tucson, that's a haul.
Yeah.
LA to Rutgers is a haul. I mean, Cal and Stanford to anywhere in the ACC, to Boston College. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, the geography in these conferences is just gone. I mean, we used to develop, these conferences was based on geography initially.
Yeah.
And now it has nothing to do with it. And it's become more like the NFL, but
it really has.
At least in the NFL, you have these, you have these divisions that are somewhat locale based. But in college football now, there's nothing like that. I mean, it's basically like the non-division schedule in the NFL where you're flying to London half the time, like the Jaguars. I feel like it's going to be different for a lot of these teams. And I think some of them may struggle even more so this year than going forward, just because this is the first time they do it.
Well, I mean, you look at like the SEC and you're in Auburn, Alabama. Okay. 6-hour drive. You could get to Athens, Knoxville, Vanderbilt, Lexington, Tuscaloosa, Oxford, and Starkville. Am I forgetting anybody? Probably Columbia, Missouri, Columbia, South Carolina too. It's driving distance for games. Nobody is going to be driving from Seattle except maybe to Eugene. That's it. Yeah. The rivalry aspect is gone where you can have people drive. It's going to have to be flight. And that's a concern.
It is a concern. I mean, we've seen it in the NFL where teams in the West Coast who have to fly to the East Coast and do the 1:00 kicks, it's not a good win percentage. And, college starts an hour earlier. And some of these guys are going to be starting at 12 noon, 9 a.m. their time. And that has to affect these people as we see it in the
NCAA basketball tournament. I mean, you have these West Coast teams that play an 11 o'clock tip. I mean, you're not used to it. You're just not.
There's no real way to make yourself except doing it. And even doing it just wears you out. I don't think you ever really get used to it. You just get tired. So we'll see how that plays out as we move on. But I like what we've done here today. Just as a recap, we had Georgia, Texas, Bama, Missouri, and Tennessee for James in the SEC. You didn't. You had Bama 4, right? You had Missouri 3.
Missouri 3, yep.
Yep, and I had Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, and Tennessee in my top 5. And then the Big Ten, you had OSU, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we got a pretty good handle on the Power 2 is what I like to call it, because let's be honest, it's really the Power 2. I mean, there's the Big Ten, there's the SEC, and there's everybody else. And that's the question I've got for you is how many teams are getting in this 12-team playoff from these two conferences?
8.
I would think so.
I think you got it. I think it's 8 of the 12.
Yeah.
I think 4 of each.
4 of each. You take the champ from the Big 12. You take the champ from the ACC. And then, if either one of those conferences has any team with a pulse behind them, maybe you let 1 or 2 others in. But I think
Notre Dame's going to get in. And I know Notre Dame's getting in this year. And then somebody from the non-Power 5.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We're going to find out a lot about Texas A&M and Notre Dame that first week.
Oh, God, yeah.
I like that. I'm gonna be watching that game very closely to see what I think of Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman and what I think of Texas A&M and Coach Elko. So that's going to be a good one on week 1. All right. Well, we're out of time for today, but we'll be back next week to talk about the non-Power 2 conferences and break down the ACC and also the Big 12, which is actually the Big 16 and actually isn't in the Southwest anymore. So we will talk about those teams as we move forward. And wow, college football's back. We are back. I'm excited. I've got a renewed sense of life now that I know that we'll be able to watch football very, very shortly.
And I'm looking so forward to talking about Colorado next week.
Yeah, there's a lot. We didn't even get there today, but there's a lot to unpack with what's going on in Boulder. And I think the best way to describe the current state of the Colorado program is to say that our friend of the program, Darian Hagan, is gone. He is now coaching at San Diego State. And I think that says all you need to know about what's going on in Boulder.
The Sons of Montezuma got a hell of a coach. Sean Lewis is going to do a great job in San Diego.
I agree. I look at this team to overachieve, and I look for this team to be well coached all the way around, and not just because obviously I'm a huge Darian Hagan fan, and we love him on this show. But he's a good football coach. He's a great guy, and I think Coach Lewis is going to do really good things out there. And I'm looking for the Aztecs to step back up.
Hey, and Darian Dalton, the D tackle,
another friend of the program.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I've saw him tearing it up on some practice tape and gave him a shout out online. So I'm looking forward to seeing him make some moves this year from the D tackle position. So we'll be watching that very closely, and we'll break the rest of that down next week. James, thank you for your time, and as always, keep your chin up, buddy.
Hey, you bet. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, bud.